German Shepherd was abandoned in the jungle with tied paws. What baby did next left everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen will make your heart stop. A helpless dog left to die in the wilderness, and the tiny hero who changed everything. What happened next shocked an entire town and will leave you in tears. Sunrise painted the sky in gentle hues of orange and pink as it peeked through the dense canopy of trees surrounding Whispering Vale. The small town nestled between rolling hills and the edge of the vast jungle was known for its peaceful existence, the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name, and secrets were hard to keep. The morning dew clung to blades of grass, and birds chirped their melodious tunes, creating a symphony that welcomed the new day. In a modest cabin at the edge of town, 5-year-old Milo rubbed his sleepy eyes and climbed out of bed. His room was filled with stuffed animals, mostly dogs of different shapes and sizes. Unlike other children his age who filled their shelves with superhero toys or action figures, Milo's world revolved around animals. His small fingers reached for his favorite plushie, a worn-out German Shepherd he had named Scout. "Good morning, Scout," Milo whispered, his voice barely audible. Words didn't come easily to Milo. In fact, they rarely came at all. At 5 years old, he had spoken fewer words than most 2-year-olds. The doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by trauma. Milo didn't call it anything. He simply existed in a world where his thoughts stayed locked inside his head, his emotions expressed through his large, expressive brown eyes rather than words. Jake, Milo's father, knocked gently on the door before pushing it open. His weathered face broke into a warm smile at the sight of his son already awake, clutching Scout. "Hey, buddy," Jake said, his voice carrying the gentleness of a man who had learned to speak for two. "Looks like someone's up early today. Pancakes or waffles?" Milo held up 2 fingers. "Waffles it is," Jake nodded, understanding their silent language perfectly. Jake's ranger uniform hung freshly pressed on the back of a chair. As the head forest ranger of Whispering Vale, his days were spent patrolling the dense jungle that surrounded their town, ensuring both the wildlife and the occasional hikers remained safe. It wasn't an easy job for a single father, but Jake had managed ever since Emma, his wife and Milo's mother, had succumbed to a sudden illness 2 years ago. The kitchen filled with the sweet aroma of maple syrup as Jake prepared breakfast. Through the window, Milo could see dark clouds gathering in the distance. Rain was coming. He pressed his small nose against the glass, his breath creating a small circle of fog. "Looks like it's going to pour today," Jake noted, placing a plate of waffles in front of his son. "Which means you'll have to stay inside, okay? The jungle gets dangerous when it rains. Paths get slippery, and it's easy to get lost." Milo nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the line of trees visible from their window. Something about the jungle always called to him, like a whispered secret he couldn't quite make out. His father had told him stories about the animals that lived there, deer with their gentle eyes, foxes with their bushy tails, and sometimes, if you were very quiet and very lucky, you might even spot a wolf. But Milo had never seen a wolf. He wondered if they looked like Scout, his stuffed German Shepherd. He wondered if they had sad eyes too. "I've got to head out early today," Jake said, checking his watch. "Mrs. Patterson will be here in 15 minutes to watch you. Be good for her, okay?" Milo nodded again, taking small bites of his waffle. Mrs. Patterson was nice enough, an elderly lady who smelled like lavender and always brought hard candies in her purse. But she also fell asleep in the armchair after lunch, her soft snores filling the quiet house for at least an hour. Jake bent down and pressed a kiss to Milo's forehead. "I love you, buddy. Remember, stay inside today." As if punctuating his words, a distant rumble of thunder echoed across the sky. Jake grabbed his raincoat from the hook by the door, gave Milo one last smile, and headed out. Milo finished his breakfast in silence, his mind already formulating a plan. He didn't want to disobey his father, not really. But something felt different about today. There was a strange feeling in his chest, like the flutter of butterfly wings, urging him toward the jungle. By the time Mrs. Patterson arrived, the first drops of rain had begun to fall. She hurried inside, her gray hair protected by a plastic rain bonnet. "Oh my, it's coming down hard already," she exclaimed, shaking water droplets from her coat. "Hello, Milo, dear. I brought some cookies for later. Chocolate chip, your favorite." Milo smiled politely and helped her hang up her coat. "Let's see what's on TV today, shall we?" Mrs. Patterson settled into the armchair, remote in hand. "I think there's a cartoon about talking dogs that you might like." The morning passed slowly. Rain pattered against the windows, growing stronger with each passing hour. Mrs. Patterson dozed off during her stories, just as Milo had expected. Her soft snores joined the symphony of rain and distant thunder. Milo's eyes darted to the back door. His yellow raincoat hung on a low hook, purposely placed there by Jake so his son could reach it himself. Next to it were his rubber boots, decorated with little paw prints. The flutter in his chest grew stronger. Something was calling him, something important. With careful, quiet movements, Milo slipped off the couch. He tiptoed past Mrs. Patterson, holding his breath when she shifted slightly in her sleep. He grabbed his raincoat and boots, putting them on with practiced ease. As an afterthought, he grabbed his toy binoculars from the side table, a birthday gift from his father. The back door opened with a soft creak, but the sound of rain muffled it. Milo stepped outside, instantly enveloped by the cool dampness of the air. Rain splashed against his hooded face, but he didn't mind. The feeling in his chest was stronger now, pulling him toward the tree line like an invisible string. Milo knew he wasn't supposed to go into the jungle alone. His father had told him countless times about the dangers, slippery paths, rising creeks, disorientation. But today felt different. Today, the jungle wasn't calling to his curiosity. It was calling to something deeper, something he couldn't explain even if he had the words. The path leading into the trees was muddy, his boots leaving small imprints with each step. The canopy above provided some shelter from the rain, though fat droplets still found their way through, landing on his hood with soft plops. The usual sounds of the jungle were muted by the rainfall, creating an eerie silence broken only by the rhythmic dripping of water from leaves. Milo clutched his toy binoculars tightly, more for comfort than any practical use. The familiar weight in his small hands gave him courage as he ventured further than he had ever gone before. As he walked, the strange feeling in his chest grew stronger. It wasn't fear, though perhaps it should have been. It was urgency. Something needed him. Something was waiting. The rain began to ease slightly, allowing more of the jungle's natural sounds to filter through. Birds called to each other, hidden in the leafy canopy above. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked under the weight of some unseen creature. And then, another sound. Different. Wrong. Milo froze, his head tilting slightly as he tried to catch it again. There. A whimper, faint and pained, coming from somewhere off the main path. Without hesitation, he turned toward it, moving carefully through the underbrush. Thorny vines caught at his raincoat, but he paid them no mind. The whimpering grew louder. It wasn't a human sound. It was an animal in pain. Milo's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed aside a large fern and saw what lay beyond. The muddy ground sloped downward into a small ravine, and at the bottom, half buried in mud, was a shape. A large shape with fur matted by rain and dirt. A dog. A German shepherd, just like Scout, but real and hurt and terrified. Even from where he stood, Milo could see the cruel ropes binding the dog's legs, cutting into flesh. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had brought this beautiful animal deep into the jungle, tied it up, and left it to die. Thunder rumbled overhead, but Milo barely heard it. All he could focus on was the dog's eyes, amber and filled with a pain that went beyond physical suffering. Those eyes locked with his, and in that moment, something passed between them. A recognition, a plea. Milo's fingers tightened around his toy binoculars. For the first time in his life, he wished he had words. He wished he could call for help, or tell the dog that everything would be okay. But he didn't need words, not really. Because some things run deeper than language. Without a second thought, Milo began to make his way down the slippery slope toward the trapped animal. The mud sucked at his boots, nearly pulling them off with each step. Twice he lost his balance, sliding several feet before regaining his footing. The rain began to fall harder again, rendering the descent even more treacherous. But Milo didn't turn back. He couldn't. Not with those amber eyes watching his every move, holding a flicker of what might have been hope. Back at the cabin, Mrs. Patterson stirred from her nap with a startled snort. Her eyes blinked open, adjusting to the dim light of the rainy afternoon. The TV was still on, playing a cooking show she didn't remember selecting. "Milo?" she called, sitting up straighter. "Milo, dear, where are you?" The house remained silent save for the patter of rain against the windows. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she stood up, checking the kitchen, the bathroom, Milo's bedroom, all empty. Her eyes landed on the back door, slightly ajar. The hook where Milo's yellow raincoat should have been was empty. So was the spot for his rubber boots. "Oh no," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh dear God, no." With trembling fingers, she reached for the phone and dialed Jake's number. Miles away, deep in another part of the jungle, Jake's radio crackled to life just as his phone began to ring. 2 emergencies at once, one from the station about hikers stranded by rising waters, and one from home about his missing son. Rain poured from the darkened sky as if the heavens themselves were weeping, unaware of the small boy who braved the elements, driven by a force stronger than fear, moving steadily toward a creature that needed him more than anything in the world. And somewhere between them, something miraculous was about to unfold. The mud at the bottom of the ravine was thicker than anything Milo had ever felt. It clung to his boots like glue, making each step a struggle. His small body shivered as rain seeped through the gaps in his raincoat, but he pressed forward. The German Shepherd hadn't moved, except for the slight rise and fall of its chest, proving it was still alive. As Milo got closer, the full horror of what had been done to this animal became clear. Thick ropes were wrapped around all 4 legs, so tight they had cut into the fur and skin. Wire had been twisted around the dog's muzzle, though not tight enough to completely prevent breathing. Someone hadn't just abandoned this dog, they had tortured it first. The dog's eyes followed Milo's every movement, but there was no aggression, no growling or baring of teeth, just exhaustion, and a pain so deep it seemed to radiate from every inch of its body. One of its back legs lay at an odd angle, clearly broken. Milo knelt beside the animal, his small hands trembling. Up close, he could see that this was no ordinary pet. The dog was massive, with a noble bearing that spoke of good breeding and training. Its coat, despite being matted with mud, showed hints of the rich black and tan coloring of a purebred German Shepherd. "Hey," Milo whispered, his voice so soft it was barely audible above the rain. It was the first word he had spoken in weeks. The dog's ears twitched at the sound. Those amber eyes, clouded with pain, seemed to focus more intently on the small boy kneeling beside it. Milo reached out slowly, his fingers hovering inches from the dog's head. The animal could have snapped at him, could have bitten those small fingers in its pain and fear. Instead, it remained perfectly still, as if understanding that this child meant no harm. When Milo's fingers finally made contact with the dog's wet fur, something extraordinary happened. The animal let out a soft whine, not of pain, but of relief, as if it had been waiting for this gentle touch, this small act of kindness in a world that had shown it only cruelty. "I'm going to help you," Milo whispered, the words coming easier now. "I promise." He pulled his toy binoculars from around his neck and set them aside. With his small fingers, he began working at the ropes around the dog's front legs. The knots were tight, made worse by the rain and the dog's struggles to free itself. Milo's fingernails broke as he tried to loosen them, but he didn't give up. The rope was too thick, the knots too complex for a 5-year-old's fingers. Frustration bubbled up in Milo's chest, but he swallowed it down. There had to be another way. He looked around the ravine and spotted a sharp rock jutting from the muddy wall. Carefully, he made his way over to it and began working to pry it loose. The rock was bigger than he expected, nearly the size of his fist, with a jagged edge that might cut through rope. As he worked to free the rock, Milo became aware of sounds above the rain. Voices, multiple voices, getting closer. "He can't have gone far," a man's voice called out. "Split up. Check every path." That was his father's voice, tight with panic and fear. Milo froze. If they found him here, they would take him home before he could free the dog. The animal would die, alone and bound, in this muddy ravine. The rock came free suddenly, sending Milo tumbling backward into the mud. He scrambled back to the dog's side, now completely covered in muck, but holding his makeshift cutting tool. The dog watched him with those intelligent eyes, and Milo could swear he saw understanding there. This animal knew what was happening. It knew that this small, brave child was its only hope. Milo began sawing at the rope around the dog's front right leg. The rock's edge was sharper than he had hoped, and the wet rope began to fray almost immediately. Strand by strand, it started to give way. "There, I see tracks," another voice shouted from somewhere above. Milo's heart pounded, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The first rope snapped, and the dog's front leg fell free. Immediately, circulation began returning to the limb, and the animal whimpered softly. "It's okay," Milo whispered, moving to the next rope. "Almost there." The voices were getting closer. Flashlight beams swept across the trees above the ravine, creating dancing shadows in the dim afternoon light. The second rope proved more stubborn. It was thicker, and Milo's small arms were getting tired. His hands were raw from gripping the sharp rock, but he kept sawing, back and forth, back and forth. "Milo!" Jake's voice boomed across the jungle, closer now than before. "Milo, if you can hear me, call out!" Milo's throat tightened. He wanted to call out to his father, wanted to feel those strong arms wrap around him and carry him to safety, but not yet. Not until he finished what he had started. The second rope snapped with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet ravine. The dog's front legs were now free, and it lifted its head slightly, as if testing its renewed mobility. Moving quickly now, Milo attacked the rope around the dog's back legs. This one was even thicker, wound around both legs together, but the sharp rock was doing its job, and Milo had found his rhythm. Above them, the search party was getting closer. He could hear multiple sets of footsteps, the cracking of branches, the urgent calls back and forth between searchers. "Over here!" someone shouted. "The tracks lead to this ravine!" Milo's breath caught in his throat, but he didn't stop cutting. The rope was almost through, just a few more strokes. The dog seemed to sense the urgency too. Despite its pain and exhaustion, it began to shift its weight, preparing to move once its legs were free. With a final, desperate saw of the rock, the thick rope parted. The dog's back legs were free, though the broken one remained useless. But there was still the wire around its muzzle. Milo reached for the twisted metal and immediately felt how tightly it had been wound. This would be impossible to cut with his rock. He would have to untwist it carefully without hurting the dog further. "I think I see something down there." Jake's voice came from directly above them now. Milo looked up to see his father's silhouette at the edge of the ravine, backlit by the gray sky. Other figures joined him: Mrs. Patterson, several neighbors, and 2 other park rangers. "Milo," Jake called down, "are you hurt?" Milo opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, he turned back to the dog and began working at the wire around its muzzle. His small fingers were clumsy with cold and fear, but gradually he began to loosen the cruel binding. "What is he doing down there?" he heard Mrs. Patterson ask. "There's an animal," one of the rangers said, shining his flashlight down into the ravine. "A big dog, by the looks of it." "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed. "Someone call the vet. Now." The wire finally came free, and the dog's mouth opened for the first time in what must have been days. It panted heavily, its tongue lolling out as it tasted freedom. Milo placed his small hand on the dog's head, feeling the warmth of its fur beneath his palm. The animal looked at him with something that transcended gratitude. It was recognition, one soul acknowledging another. "I'll come back for you," Milo whispered, though he knew the adults would never let the dog stay in this ravine. Jake appeared at his side, having rappelled down into the ravine with a rope. His face was a mask of relief, anger, and awe all at once. "Milo, what were you thinking?" he demanded, but his voice was gentle as he pulled his son into his arms. "You scared us to death." Milo buried his face in his father's chest, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue was fading, leaving him cold and shaking. "The dog," Milo whispered. "Someone hurt him bad." Jake looked over at the German shepherd, taking in the cut ropes, the twisted wire, the obvious signs of abuse. His jaw tightened with anger. "I see that, buddy. We're going to help him too, okay? But first, we need to get you both out of here." More ropes were lowered into the ravine. 2 rangers came down to help with the injured dog, while Jake secured Milo in a safety harness. The dog tried to stand as the rangers approached, but its broken leg gave out immediately. It looked anxiously toward Milo, as if afraid the boy was abandoning it. "It's okay," Milo called softly, as Jake prepared to lift him out of the ravine. "They're going to help you. I promise." Something remarkable happened then. The dog, despite its pain and exhaustion, despite being handled by strangers, remained calm. Its eyes stayed locked on Milo until the boy disappeared over the edge of the ravine. As they reached the top, Milo was wrapped in warm blankets and fussed over by Mrs. Patterson, who alternated between scolding him and hugging him. The other searchers gathered around, all talking at once about the incredible scene they had witnessed. But Milo's attention was focused on the ravine, where the 2 rangers were carefully securing the injured dog in a rescue sling. The animal was massive, easily 80 pounds, and moving it would be no easy task. "Dr. Martinez is waiting at the clinic," one of the searchers reported. "She's prepared for trauma surgery if needed." Jake knelt beside his son, studying the small, muddy face that looked so much like his late wife's. "Milo, I need you to tell me the truth. How did you know that dog was down there?" Milo looked up at his father with those large, expressive eyes. How could he explain the strange pull he had felt? The certainty that something needed him? The flutter in his chest that had led him through the rain and into the jungle? "I heard him crying," Milo said simply. Jake looked back toward the ravine, where the dog was finally being lifted to safety. The distance from where they stood to where the animal had been trapped was considerable. The rain and thick vegetation should have muffled any sound. Yet somehow, his 5-year-old son had heard a creature in distress and had risked everything to help it. As the German Shepherd was carried past them on a makeshift stretcher, its head turned toward Milo. Their eyes met one more time, and Jake could have sworn he saw the dog's tail attempt a weak wag. "What's going to happen to him?" Milo asked. "First, Dr. Martinez will make sure he's okay," Jake replied. "Then we'll try to find out where he came from and who did this to him." "Can we visit him?" Jake looked at his son, really looked at him. In the space of one afternoon, something had changed in Milo. There was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there since Emma's death, a sense of purpose. "Yeah, buddy," Jake said, pulling him closer. "We can visit him." As they made their way back through the jungle, Milo clutched his toy binoculars and thought about amber eyes and gentle spirits. He thought about cruelty and kindness, about the ropes that bind and the love that sets free. Behind them, the ravine sat empty except for the cut ropes and twisted wire, evidence of both the worst and best of humanity, played out in a muddy hole in the middle of nowhere. But the dog was safe now, and somehow that made everything else bearable. What none of them knew was that this was only the beginning. The German Shepherd they had rescued was no ordinary animal, and the people who had abandoned it in the jungle would not give up easily. The metal tag hidden beneath its matted fur held secrets that would put them all in danger. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched the rescue party disappear into the jungle, calculating their next move. Dr. Martinez's veterinary clinic sat on the quiet main street of Whispering Vale, its cheerful yellow walls and flower boxes giving no hint of the drama that was about to unfold within. The elderly veterinarian had been practicing for over 30 years, but she had never seen anything quite like the German Shepherd that was rushed through her doors that rainy evening. "Get him on the examination table," she instructed the rangers who carried the makeshift stretcher. "Carefully now, that back leg is definitely broken." Jake stood near the doorway with Milo pressed against his side, both of them still damp from the rain. The boy's eyes never left the injured dog as Dr. Martinez began her examination. "Sweet Jesus," the vet whispered as she took in the full extent of the animal's injuries. The rope burns around his legs were deep, some infected from days of exposure to mud and moisture. His ribs showed clearly through his matted fur. He hadn't eaten in at least a week, possibly longer, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Despite the pain and exhaustion, there was an intelligence there that seemed almost human. This was no ordinary stray. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing," Dr. Martinez said quietly to Jake. "These knots, the way the ropes were positioned, this was methodical torture." Milo stepped forward, his small hand reaching toward the dog's head. The animal's ears perked up at his approach, and that strange calm descended over him again. "It's okay, boy," Milo whispered. "You're safe now." The dog's tail gave a weak wag, and he tried to lift his head toward the child's voice. "Remarkable," Dr. Martinez murmured. "He's been aggressive toward everyone else, but with your son—" "They have a connection," Jake said, still trying to understand what he had witnessed in the ravine. As Dr. Martinez worked to clean the dog's wounds, she made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden beneath the thick, matted fur around his neck was something hard and metallic. "There's something here," she said, carefully parting the fur. "Looks like a tag of some kind." But this wasn't an ordinary dog tag with a name and phone number. What Dr. Martinez extracted from the tangled fur was a small metal disc, no bigger than a quarter, with strange symbols etched into its surface. Numbers and letters that didn't form any recognizable pattern. Jake leaned in for a closer look. "That's not like any dog tag I've ever seen." The symbols appeared to be some kind of code, a series of numbers followed by letters that meant nothing to anyone in the room. But there was something official about it, something that suggested government or military involvement. "I'll need to keep him overnight," Dr. Martinez said, setting the mysterious tag aside. "Maybe longer. That leg needs surgery and he's severely dehydrated, but he's strong. He'll make it. Milo tugged on his father's shirt. Can we stay with him? Buddy, he needs to rest, and so do you. We'll come back tomorrow, I promise. As they prepared to leave, the dog tried to lift his head again, searching for Milo. The boy ran back to the examination table and gently placed his hand on the animal's head. I'll come back, he whispered. I promise. Something passed between them in that moment, a bond that transcended species and circumstance. The dog's amber eyes held Milo's gaze for a long moment before exhaustion finally claimed him. The next morning brought clear skies and sunshine, a dramatic contrast to the previous day's storm. Milo woke early, dressed himself, and was waiting by the front door when Jake came downstairs for coffee. Someone's eager, Jake smiled, though he felt the same urgency to check on their rescued friend. They arrived at the clinic to find Dr. Martinez already at work, a cup of coffee in one hand and the mysterious metal tag in the other. I've been studying this all night, she said without preamble. These symbols, they're not random. This is some kind of identification system, but not civilian. Military? Jake asked. That would be my guess, but I've never seen anything like it. They moved to the recovery area where the German Shepherd lay on a soft bed, his broken leg now in a cast. He was awake, and his head immediately turned toward the sound of their voices. When he saw Milo, his entire demeanor changed. His tail began a steady rhythm against the blanket, and he tried to sit up. Easy, boy, Dr. Martinez said. You're not ready for that yet. Milo approached slowly and knelt beside the bed. The dog nuzzled his hand, and for the first time since the rescue, he seemed truly at peace. Have you thought of a name for him? Dr. Martinez asked. Milo looked into those intelligent amber eyes and considered. This wasn't just any dog. This was a survivor, a fighter who had endured unimaginable cruelty and still found the strength to trust. Max, Milo said softly. His name is Max. The dog's ears perked up at the sound, as if he approved of his new identity. Dr. Martinez had just opened her mouth to respond when the clinic's front door chimed. They all turned to see a woman entering. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in an expensive black suit that seemed out of place in their small town. Good morning, the woman said, her voice crisp and professional. I'm looking for Dr. Martinez. That's me, the vet replied, instinctively moving closer to Max's bed. My name is Agent Sarah Cross. I'm with the Animal Recovery Division. She flashed a badge too quickly for anyone to read clearly. I understand you're treating a German Shepherd that was found yesterday. Jake stepped forward, his ranger instincts kicking in. Something about this woman didn't feel right. And you are here because? The animal in question is part of an ongoing investigation. I'm here to take custody of him. Investigation into what? Dr. Martinez demanded. Agent Cross's smile was cold and practiced. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but I can assure you the animal will receive proper care. Max had gone completely still at the sound of the woman's voice. His ears were flattened against his head, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, the first aggressive sound he had made since the rescue. Milo looked between Max and the strange woman, sensing the dog's distress. He doesn't like her, he whispered to his father. I need to see some identification, Jake said firmly, and I want to know what kind of investigation requires taking an abused animal away from veterinary care. Agent Cross's expression hardened. Sir, I don't think you understand. This is a matter of national security. The animal comes with me now. Dr. Martinez crossed her arms. Over my dead body. This dog is in critical condition. Moving him now could kill him. Then that's a risk we'll have to take. Max's growling grew louder, and he tried to get to his feet despite his injuries. His entire body was tense, ready to fight despite his weakened condition. Milo placed his hand on Max's head, and immediately the dog calmed slightly, though his eyes never left Agent Cross. There's something you're not telling us, Jake said. No federal agent shows up 12 hours after we rescue a dog unless there's more to this story. Agent Cross reached into her jacket, and for a moment Jake tensed, wondering if she was going for a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a cell phone. I'm calling for backup, she said coldly. You can hand over the animal voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way. Wait, Dr. Martinez said, picking up the metal tag from her desk. Maybe this will help explain things. We found this on him. Agent Cross's eyes locked onto the tag, and her entire demeanor shifted. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out. Where exactly did you find that? Hidden in his fur. What does it mean? Instead of answering, Agent Cross grabbed for the tag. Dr. Martinez pulled her hand back, keeping it out of reach. "I think you need to start telling us the truth," Jake said. "What is that dog, and why do you want him so badly?" Agent Cross's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it briefly. Whatever she saw there made her face go pale. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into," she said quietly. "That animal is worth more than this entire town, and there are people who will do anything to get him back." "People like whoever tied him up and left him to die?" Milo asked, speaking for the first time since the woman had arrived. Agent Cross looked at the small boy with something that might have been surprise. "Smart kid. Yes, people exactly like that." Max struggled to his feet, ignoring his broken leg and the pain it must have caused. He positioned himself between Milo and Agent Cross, his hackles raised. "He's protecting me," Milo realized with wonder. "And you have no idea why," Agent Cross said. "Dr. Martinez, I'm going to ask you one more time. Hand over that tag and step away from the animal." "No." The single word came from Milo, spoken with a quiet strength that surprised everyone in the room. He stood up and moved closer to Max, one small hand resting on the dog's head. "He's hurt and scared, and you're making it worse. Whatever you want with him, the answer is no." Agent Cross stared at the 5-year-old boy who was standing up to a federal agent without a trace of fear in his voice. "Son, you don't understand. I understand that someone hurt him real bad and left him to die. I understand that he's scared of you, and I understand that sometimes grown-ups lie." Jake felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. His son was finding his voice, but at what cost? Agent Cross's phone buzzed again. This time, when she read the message, her face went white. "They're coming," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Jesus Christ, they're already coming." "Who's coming?" Dr. Martinez demanded. Agent Cross looked around the room, at the injured dog, at the small boy protecting him, at the adults who had no idea what they had stumbled into. "The people who made him what he is," she said finally, "and trust me, they're not as patient as I am." Outside, the sound of vehicles pulling into the clinic's parking lot could be heard. Multiple vehicles, by the sound of it. Max's growling became more intense, and he tried to move toward the front of the clinic despite his injuries. "Back door," Jake said quickly. "Is there a back door?" Dr. Martinez nodded. "Through the surgery, but where are we going to go?" "My grandfather's cabin," Jake said. "Deep in the mountains. If these people are as dangerous as she says, we need to get Max and Milo somewhere safe." Agent Cross looked at them with something that might have been respect. "You have no idea what you're up against." "Then maybe it's time you told us," Jake replied. Outside, car doors slammed, and the sound of boots on gravel could be heard approaching the clinic. "There's no time," Agent Cross said, "but if you want to keep that boy and that dog alive, you need to run. Now." Milo looked up at his father with complete trust. "We can't leave Max." Jake scooped up his son while Dr. Martinez grabbed a bag of medical supplies. Max, despite his broken leg, limped determinedly beside them as they headed for the back exit. Behind them, Agent Cross remained in the main room, straightening her jacket and preparing to face whoever was coming through that front door. As they slipped out the back of the clinic, Jake caught a glimpse of black SUVs surrounding the building. Men in dark suits were getting out, and none of them looked like they were interested in a peaceful conversation. The mystery of Max was deepening, and Jake had the sinking feeling that their quiet life in Whispering Vale was about to change forever. Whatever secret the dog carried, it was worth killing for. And somehow, his 5-year-old son had become the only thing standing between an injured animal and the people who wanted to silence them both. The old mining road that led to Jake's grandfather's cabin hadn't been used in years. Weeds grew through cracks in the asphalt, and fallen branches made the journey treacherous, but it was their only hope of staying hidden. Jake's truck bounced violently over every pothole, and in the back seat, Dr. Martinez tried to keep Max stable while Milo held the dog's head in his lap. "How much further?" Dr. Martinez asked, checking Max's bandages for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "Another mile," Jake replied, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. "The cabin's completely off the grid. No electricity, no phone service. If we're lucky, they won't think to look there." Max whimpered softly as the truck hit another deep pothole. His broken leg was causing him obvious pain, made worse by the rough ride. Milo stroked his head gently, whispering words of comfort. "It's okay, boy. We're almost there. You're going to be safe." The dog's amber eyes stayed fixed on Milo's face, finding comfort in the child's presence, even as pain racked his body. Dr. Martinez pulled out the mysterious metal tag she had grabbed before their escape. In the dim light of the truck's interior, the strange symbols seemed to shift and change, but she knew that was just her imagination running wild. "Jake, I need to tell you something," she said quietly. When that woman saw this tag, she recognized it immediately. Whatever this is, it's not just some random identification number. What do you think it means? I think Max isn't just a dog who was abused and abandoned. I think he was part of something big enough that people are willing to kill to get him back. They reached the cabin just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. It was a small, rustic structure built of logs and stone, nestled among tall pine trees that provided natural camouflage. Jake's grandfather had built it as a hunting retreat decades ago, back when the mountains were truly wild. Jake helped Dr. Martinez carry Max inside while Milo ran ahead to open doors. The cabin smelled of old wood and dust, but it was dry and warm. Jake lit an oil lamp, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "There's a bed in the back room," Jake said. "We can make Max comfortable there." As they settled the injured dog on a pile of old quilts, Max's behavior began to change. His ears perked up, and he lifted his head despite his exhaustion. Something had caught his attention. "What is it, boy?" Milo asked, kneeling beside him. Max let out a soft whine and tried to get to his feet. His broken leg wouldn't support his weight, but he kept trying, his eyes fixed on something only he could see or hear. "He's sensing something," Dr. Martinez said. "Animals have instincts we don't understand." Jake moved to the window and peered out through the dusty glass. The forest looked peaceful enough, but something felt wrong. The usual evening sounds, birds calling, insects chirping, were absent. The woods were too quiet. "We need to talk about what happens next," Dr. Martinez said. "Max needs proper medical care, and we can't stay hidden forever." "First, we need to understand what we're dealing with," Jake replied. "That woman, Agent Cross, she knew more than she was telling us." Milo had been quiet during this exchange, his attention focused entirely on Max. The dog had finally settled back down, but he remained alert, his ears constantly moving as he monitored sounds from outside. "Dad," Milo said suddenly, "I think Max is trying to tell us something." "What do you mean?" "He keeps looking at the door, then back at me, like he's warning us." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. His son had an unusual connection with animals, but this felt different. This felt urgent. That's when they heard it. The distant sound of engines, multiple vehicles moving slowly along the old mining road. "They found us," Dr. Martinez whispered. Jake blew out the oil lamp, plunging the cabin into darkness. Through the window, he could see headlights flickering between the trees, still at least a quarter-mile away but getting closer. "How is that possible?" he wondered aloud. "This place isn't on any map." Max struggled to his feet again, this time with more determination. Despite his broken leg, he limped toward the cabin's back door, looking over his shoulder at Milo as if to say, "Follow me." "He knows a way out," Milo said with certainty. "Milo, he's just a dog. He doesn't—" "No, Dad, he's not just a dog. Look at him." Jake did look, and what he saw made him question everything he thought he knew about animals. Max's eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. This wasn't instinct or training. This was conscious thought and planning.
"There's something I haven't told you," Dr. Martinez said suddenly. "When I was examining Max, I found scars. Surgical scars. Someone operated on his brain."
Yeah. The headlights were getting closer now, and the sound of engines was unmistakable. They had minutes, maybe less, before whoever was hunting them arrived at the cabin. "What kind of operation?" Jake asked as he gathered supplies. "I'm not sure, but it wasn't veterinary. The precision, the location of the incisions, it was neurosurgery. Advanced neurosurgery." Max had reached the back door and was pawing at it urgently. His message was clear. They needed to leave, and they needed to leave now. Jake opened the door, and Max immediately limped outside, moving with surprising speed despite his injuries. He headed not for the obvious escape route down the back slope, but toward a barely visible trail that led deeper into the mountains. "He knows where he's going," Milo said with absolute conviction. They followed the injured dog into the darkness, Dr. Martinez carrying her medical bag, and Jake with Milo on his shoulders. Behind them, the sound of vehicles reached the cabin, followed by the slam of car doors and shouted orders. "Search the perimeter! They can't have gone far with an injured animal!" The voice was crisp and authoritative, definitely not Agent Cross. These were the people she had warned them about. Max led them along a narrow deer path that wound between massive pine trees. His progress was slow but steady, and he seemed to know exactly where he was going. Every few minutes he would stop and look back, making sure they were still following. "This is impossible," Dr. Martinez panted as they climbed steadily upward. "How does he know this trail?" "Maybe he's been here before," Milo suggested. Jake thought about that possibility. His grandfather's cabin had been abandoned for years, but before that, it had been used regularly by hunters and hikers. Could Max have been brought here as part of whatever program had created him? They walked for almost an hour, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. Max never wavered in his direction, leading them higher into the mountains with the confidence of someone who had walked this path before. Finally, they reached a small clearing where an old stone structure sat hidden among the trees. It looked like a ranger station or fire lookout, long abandoned but still solid. Max collapsed near the entrance, his strength finally giving out. Milo immediately knelt beside him, checking the bandages on his broken leg. "He's bleeding again," Milo said with concern. Dr. Martinez examined the dog by moonlight. The exertion reopened some of his wounds, but he'll be okay. He's tougher than he looks. Jake explored the old structure and found it was indeed an abandoned fire lookout. There were supplies inside, old but usable, blankets, canned food, even a first aid kit. "We can rest here for the night," he decided, "but we need answers. We need to figure out what Max really is and why people are willing to kill for him." As if he understood the conversation, Max lifted his head and looked directly at Jake. Then, something extraordinary happened. The dog began to move in a specific pattern, despite his broken leg. He limped to the center of the clearing and used his nose to push small stones into a deliberate arrangement. When he was finished, he had created a pattern that looked almost like numbers, Dr. Martinez breathed. "He's making numbers with the stones." Milo knelt beside Max and studied the pattern. "It's like the tag, the same symbols." Jake pulled out his phone, hoping for even a weak signal, but there was nothing. They were truly cut off from the outside world. "Dr. Martinez, when you said he had brain surgery, what exactly did you find?" "Small scars behind both ears and a more significant one at the base of his skull. The work was incredibly precise, professional, and recent, within the last year." Max had finished his stone pattern and now sat beside it, looking expectantly at the humans. It was clear he was trying to communicate something specific. "He's been enhanced," Jake realized. "Someone operated on his brain to make him smarter. But why? And who would do such a thing?" Before anyone could answer, Max's ears suddenly perked up. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring his broken leg, and positioned himself between the humans and the trail they had just climbed. A low growl rumbled in his chest, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a warning. Someone was coming up the mountain after them. In the distance, flashlight beams danced between the trees, getting closer with each passing minute. Their pursuers had found the trail. "How many?" Jake whispered. Max held up his right paw, then his left, then his right again, 3 times. "Did he just count?" Dr. Martinez asked in amazement. 6 people, Milo translated without hesitation. "He's telling us there are 6 people coming." Jake stared at his son and the incredible dog, who seemed to understand human language and could communicate complex ideas. Whatever they had stumbled into was bigger than animal abuse or even government experiments. This was about creating something that had never existed before, an animal with human-level intelligence. And somehow, his 5-year-old son was the key to it all. The flashlights were getting closer, and Jake knew they had to make a choice. They could keep running, hoping to stay ahead of their pursuers, or they could make a stand and demand answers. Max made the choice for them. Despite his injuries, he positioned himself at the narrow entrance to the clearing, making it clear that he would not run anymore. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. In the darkness below, voices carried on the mountain air, and Jake could make out fragments of conversation. "The asset is definitely here, and orders are to retrieve, not eliminate. The child is the priority." Jake's blood ran cold. They weren't just after Max, they were after Milo too. But why? What could a 5-year-old boy possibly have to do with an enhanced German shepherd? The answer, when it came, would shake everything he thought he knew about his son, his family, and the quiet town of Whispering Vale. Because some secrets run deeper than anyone imagines, and some bonds are forged by forces beyond human understanding. The flashlights reached the edge of the clearing just as the moon disappeared behind a cloud, plunging everything into near-total darkness. Jake pulled Milo close to his side while Dr. Martinez crouched behind the old stone structure. Max remained at the entrance to the clearing, a silent guardian despite his broken leg. "We know you're here," a voice called out from the darkness. It was calm, professional, but with an undercurrent of threat. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want to talk." "Like you talked to Max when you tied him up and left him to die?" Jake called back. A different voice answered, one Jake recognized as Agent Cross. "That wasn't us, Jake. That was the people we're trying to protect him from." "So you're the good guys now?" Dr. Martinez shouted. "It's complicated," Agent Cross replied, stepping into the clearing with her hands visible but ready. Behind her, 5 figures in tactical gear remained in the shadows, their weapons lowered but present. Max's growl intensified, but he didn't move from his position. His amber eyes never left Agent Cross, tracking her every movement. "You have something that belongs to us," Agent Cross continued, "and more importantly, you have someone who's in great danger because of what he represents." "What are you talking about?" Jake demanded, though a cold fear was growing in his stomach. Agent Cross looked directly at Milo, and her expression softened slightly. "Your son isn't just special, Jake. He's part of something that was never supposed to happen, something that certain people will kill to control or destroy." "You're talking crazy," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Tell me, Jake, has Milo always been different? Has he always understood animals in ways that other children don't? Has he ever known things he shouldn't know, felt things he couldn't explain?" Jake's mind raced back through the years, Milo's unusual empathy for animals, the way birds seemed drawn to him, how he could calm any creature just by being near it, the strange feeling that had led him to Max in the jungle. "The selective mutism," Dr. Martinez said suddenly. "It started after his mother died, but it was never really about trauma, was it?" Agent Cross finished. "It was about overwhelming sensory input, about a young mind trying to process abilities it wasn't ready for." Milo stepped forward, his small hand still resting on Max's head. "What abilities?" Agent Cross knelt down to his eye level, her movements slow and non-threatening. "You can hear them, can't you? The animals. Not with your ears, but with your mind." Milo's eyes widened. It was the first time anyone had put words to something he had always felt but never understood. "That's how you found Max," she continued. "You didn't hear his voice. You felt his pain, his fear, his desperate call for help." "That's impossible," Jake protested, but even as he said it, pieces were falling into place. All those times Milo had known things about animals that he couldn't possibly know. All those moments when he seemed to communicate without words. "Project Mindbridge," Agent Cross said, standing slowly. "A classified program designed to create telepathic bonds between humans and animals for military applications. Your wife, Jake, was one of our researchers." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jake's feet. Emma was a teacher. Emma was a brilliant neuroscientist working on the most advanced animal intelligence program ever attempted. And when she became pregnant with Milo, she was exposed to experimental neural enhancement compounds. Dr. Martinez gasped. "The same compounds used on Max?" Max was part of the program, one of 12 enhanced German shepherds designed to bond telepathically with human handlers. But something went wrong. The dogs became too intelligent, too independent. They started refusing orders, showing empathy, making their own decisions. Max whimpered softly, and Milo's hand tightened in his fur. "They hurt you because you wouldn't fight," Milo said to the dog, his voice filled with understanding and sadness. "The program was shut down," Agent Cross continued. "The dogs were supposed to be retired, but Max escaped. He's been running for months, and the people who want him dead have been hunting him." "And Milo?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Milo represents something that was never supposed to exist. A human born with the same neural enhancements that were given to the animals. A child who can communicate telepathically with enhanced creatures. That's why he found Max," Dr. Martinez breathed. "They're connected." As if to demonstrate the truth of her words, Max suddenly stood and moved to Milo's side. The boy placed both hands on the dog's head, and for a moment, both of them went perfectly still. Their breathing synchronized, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with an energy that had no name. When they broke the connection, tears were streaming down Milo's face. "He remembers the lab," Milo whispered. "He remembers the other dogs. They're gone. All of them, except him." Agent Cross nodded grimly. "The program's creators want to eliminate all evidence of its existence. That includes Max, and it includes you, Milo." "But you're here to protect them?" Jake asked. "I'm here because there are people in the government who believe that what your son represents, the possibility of true interspecies communication, is too valuable to destroy. But there are others who see him as a threat to human dominance." One of the tactical team members stepped forward and whispered something in Agent Cross's ear. Her face went pale. "We're out of time," she said urgently. "They're coming. The elimination team. They'll be here within the hour." "Who's coming?" Jake demanded. "The people who created the program and want to bury it. They have authorization to use lethal force." Max began to growl again, but this time he was looking toward the trail they had climbed earlier. His enhanced senses were picking up something the humans couldn't detect yet. "Helicopters," one of the tactical team reported. "Multiple aircraft, coming fast." "There's an old mining tunnel about half a mile north," Agent Cross said quickly. "It leads to an abandoned railway that can get you out of these mountains. But you have to go now." "What about you?" Dr. Martinez asked. "We'll try to slow them down, give you a head start." Jake looked at his son, who was still connected to Max in ways he was only beginning to understand. The child he thought he knew was something far more extraordinary and dangerous than he had ever imagined. "Milo, we have to go. Can Max make it?" The boy looked up at his father with eyes that seemed far older than his 5 years. "He'll make it. We're stronger together." As they prepared to leave the clearing, Agent Cross grabbed Jake's arm. "There's something else you need to know. Emma didn't die from illness." Jake's blood turned to ice. "What?" "She was murdered. When she found out what the program was really about, when she realized what exposure might have done to Milo, she tried to expose the whole thing. They killed her to keep her quiet." The sound of helicopters was getting louder now, and searchlights began sweeping across the forest below. "Go," Agent Cross said. "Protect your son. Protect Max. They're the future of something the world isn't ready for, but that doesn't mean it should be destroyed." Jake swept Milo into his arms while Dr. Martinez shouldered her medical bag. Max, despite his broken leg, began limping toward the north trail with determined purpose. As they reached the edge of the clearing, Milo called back to Agent Cross. "Thank you for trying to save us." "Thank you for saving him," she replied, nodding toward Max. They disappeared into the forest just as the first helicopter appeared over the tree line, its searchlight cutting through the darkness like a sword. The old mining tunnel was exactly where Agent Cross had said it would be, a dark mouth in the mountainside that seemed to swallow them as they entered. Max led the way with his enhanced night vision, while Jake used his phone's flashlight to guide the humans. The tunnel was cold and damp, filled with the echoes of their footsteps and the distant sound of dripping water, but it was also safe, at least for now. As they walked, Milo spoke softly to Max, their silent communication supplemented by whispered words of comfort and encouragement. The bond between them was visible now, undeniable and beautiful in its purity. "Where will we go?" Dr. Martinez asked. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "Somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere Milo and Max can be safe." "Dad," Milo said suddenly, "Max says there are others like him, other animals that were enhanced but escaped. They're hiding too, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Milo looked up at his father with those extraordinary eyes. "For someone who can help them, someone who can speak for them." Jake understood then that their flight through the mountains wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. His son wasn't just a victim of a failed experiment. He was something new, something unprecedented. He was a bridge between two worlds, a translator for voices that had never been heard. The sound of explosions echoed through the tunnel from far behind them. Agent Cross and her team making their stand against the elimination team. Jake said a silent prayer for the woman who had risked everything to give them this chance. As they emerged from the tunnel into the gray light of dawn, they found themselves on an abandoned railway platform deep in the wilderness. In the distance, an old freight train sat on rusty tracks, as if waiting for passengers who would never come. Max limped to the edge of the platform and sat down, his amber eyes scanning the horizon. Then he did something that made all of them stop and stare. He threw back his head and howled. It wasn't a sound of pain or fear. It was a call, long and haunting, and filled with meaning that transcended human understanding. And from across the valley, other voices answered. A wolf's howl from the north ridge, the cry of an eagle from the eastern peaks, the roar of a bear from somewhere deep in the forest. "They're answering him," Milo said with wonder. "They're telling him they hear him." "He's letting them know he's free," Dr. Martinez realized. "He's telling them there's hope." Jake pulled his son close and looked out over the wilderness that stretched endlessly before them. They were fugitives now, outcasts from the human world. But they weren't alone. Somewhere out there, other enhanced animals were waiting, creatures with intelligence and hearts and voices that deserved to be heard. And Milo, brave, extraordinary Milo, would be their translator, their advocate, their bridge to a world that wasn't ready for them, but needed them nonetheless. "What happens now?" Jake asked. Milo looked up at him with a smile that held both the innocence of childhood and the wisdom of something far greater. "Now we help them tell their stories, Dad. All of them." Max's tail wagged once, slowly, and in that simple gesture was all the approval and love that any family could need. Behind them, the sound of helicopters was fading. Ahead of them lay a future that was uncertain but filled with possibility. In a world where cruelty had tried to bind them, love had set them free.
And sometimes, that's all the miracle you need.
Don't forget to like and share this story if it touched your heart, and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything, and that the bonds between all living things are stronger than any force that tries to break them. The journey of Milo and Max was far from over, but their first victory belonged to everyone who believes that kindness is the greatest strength of all.